Welcome to the DIY Writer Show with the mild-mannered, slightly heroic host, Jeff Bacon.
This is Jeff Bacon with the DIY Writer Podcast. Today, we've got Courtney Hunter, the author of Sentience. She's also a dancer, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And she's living in Philadelphia right now, and she's loving the snow. Can't wait for the rain to come, though. I guess not. How you doing, Courtney?
I am doing good.
Yeah?
Because of the snow. Love snow. We were just talking about this a little bit before we started, but I'm a winter baby, a Capricorn, so I am definitely enjoying the snow. Took a nice walk with some mulled wine. So my energy is very good right now, and hopefully that the rain doesn't chase it all away too quickly, but all good over here.
All good over here. Cool.
Yep.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about your book. So you just released this in October.
I did.
Yeah.
It is my debut novel, so my first foray into writing. It is a science fiction novel that explores the ethics of artificial intelligence through a Turing test. So I like to describe it as like Westworld meets the Hunger Games for grown-ups. But essentially what happens inside the story is 24 people go into this Turing test. If you're not familiar with what a Turing test is, basically it's when you have computers. I'm going to try and boil this down super simply because it can be complex, but you have computers.
Please do. I'm a simple guy.
You got computers, you got the humans, and you have humans who are trying to figure out who are the computers amongst the humans, more or less. Somebody who is like, very technically savvy and well-versed in what a Turing test is probably would cringe at that description. Okay. But that's my 30,000 feet high, example of what it is. So basically these people go into an experiment that's run by a company called Algorithmos, who are running a Turing test to see if their humanoid AI can pass and go without being detected by other humans. So the AI present as humans and are kind of mixed in with a group of actual humans. And the experiment consists of all different obstacles, deterrents, things specifically devised to provoke human emotion. And I mean, from there, chaos kind of ensues. You get a little bit of romance, there's divides that form, lots of questions of what you would do when you don't know if somebody's human or not. And there's resources in question, chances to or not to save other people. And you really get to see kind of the human nature of some of these characters as they're thrust into this situation. And then on the flip side of it, you get to see the experiment from the perspective of the corporation running it and the people who created the technology and how they're kind of starting to have some regrets about what they did because the end use is a little bit different than what they expected. Mm-hmm. So that's Sentience in a nutshell, which is a lot, I know. So I usually stick with the Westworld meets Hunger Games description, and that I feel like that usually gets the point across for a lot of people. But yeah, that's Sentience. I put it out in October, 3 years to the date after I started writing it. So I started it in 2017. Wrote it straight through for a year, edited it a lot, tried to go the traditional publishing route, didn't happen, and then got really impatient and decided to put it out on my own. So now here we are.
Here you are.
Here I am.
Cool. Yeah. So what do you think about being self-published?
Ooh, a lot of things. Well, one, I was really surprised how receptive the book community is on certain platforms, and then really shocked at how there's this kind of stigma towards self-publishers on others. So like on Instagram, for example, I connected with a lot of people who've been incredibly supportive. And I thought people would be like, piss off, like, don't message me. I don't know you, get out of here. Sure. And actually ended up striking up, relationships and getting a lot of support with some of the readers I found on that platform. A lot of my early reviewers came from Instagram. But on the flip side, really surprised to see like a platform like Goodreads not very self-published author friendly, because a lot of people have kind of like abused the privilege of using the platform. So during the process of publishing my book, spoke with a friend who published before, but when he published, it was in 2012. So the platform was totally different back then. And when I sat down to follow all of his advice, I was like, what are you even talking about? Like, everybody says I can't do what you're saying that you did. So interesting. Interesting to see what pockets of the reading community are open to self-publishers versus which kind of are a little bit more hesitant to welcome self-publishers into their networks just because of how I think accessible self-publishing has become, because it is really accessible. It's really easy. So I think
it's easy to publish.
I think it is.
I will give you that.
It's not easy to write a book.
It's not easy to write a book. It's not easy to get your advertising in line. It's not easy to sell a shit ton of books.
No, but it is like the process of actually doing it is pretty easy. Everything else, totally agree. Not at all.
Totally
harder. Every other thing was probably twice as hard as I thought it was going to be.
I will tell you this. It's a growing within the author community. Goodreads. It is a growing concern to the extent that, do you really want to be on Goodreads or not? Because they are abusive no matter what. They are some of the snobbiest. Some are authors. Some are wannabe authors. Some are just, consumers of literature, and they will read anything and they don't like anything, and you get some crappy reviews. You'll get some good reviews. But it's a strange platform.
Yeah, it definitely is. I agree with that. I mean, I think Instagram is where I had, prior to doing this, like, just concentrated my efforts into promoting myself, because there's something about being able to kind of have a little bit of like control over a post in a space and get to kind of, I use Instagram as a journal pretty much. And I had been doing that prior to promoting my book. So when the time came for me to do that, all of my interaction on Instagram just felt a lot more organic than any of the platforms where I did it. I think because I had been using it in a more organic way from the beginning. But yeah, I was really surprised just to kind of see like who was and like what, where there was reception and where there wasn't. Based on listening to all of the podcasts about self-publishing that I did. And obviously some of those were dated, and what you could do back in 2012 or even 5 years ago to promote your book is very different than what it is now. And it's a
3 years ago,
very pay to play kind of environment too, which for me, going into this project, I looked at this as like a longer term investment for my writing career. I didn't expect to turn a profit on this one, more so just to kind of get my name out there. So for me, I was okay with that, but from that regard, it is, it's very much, there's a lot of spaces where it is to get the traction or the exposure that you want. It's costly.
Very much so.
So it is the act of uploading a book to Amazon and pressing launch is easy, but everything else is not. It was a very informative, like I learned a lot in the process.
Oh, wait till you go wide someday.
So
Barnes and Noble and Kobo and I think Ingram Spark's probably the biggest pain in the butt as far as I can tell, and it's still pretty easy.
Yeah, I looked at Ingram Spark. I think my biggest thing with some of the other like platforms to self-publish, at that point I had spent money on an editor, I had spent money on a cover design, and I was just looking for the least out-of-pocket cost, and Amazon offers that. They do kind of kill you on royalties, but for ease and accessibility, I mean, I think.
What do you mean they kill you on royalties?
I don't think that the royalty, like, I mean, right now my books are priced 99 cents for my ebook and $7.99 for my paperback. Really, because again, my goal is to drive sales, exposure. But when I originally launched my book, It was at $12.99, and I was making like less than $3 on a copy of my book. Now at $7.99, I think I make 50 cents, which I'm okay with that at the end of the day. I mean, my goal, like I said on this, was not to make money, because I certainly haven't with how much I spent on it. But in the future, you know, it's definitely something to consider, just based on how much I've put out to market it this round. And I do think the next time I write another book, because I have plans for a sequel and then also for a standalone. And I think with the standalone, which I think I'm going to do next, just because I feel more called that way from like an inspiration standpoint, I think I am going to try and pursue the traditional publishing route a little harder. I'm a serial creative, and I create in a lot of different spaces. And when I find a new avenue to create in, the first time I do it, I am so impatient and so impulsive. So for me, like, I had to get this out. And now that it's out, I feel like the next time I do it, I'll have the self-control to push the you know, the query process a little harder than I did this time.
I will never try that again.
You know, this is my brag. I got 2, and I don't even know like what I have. No, like, I'm so not from this like sphere that I don't know what is a successful metric or not. But I had 2 people request my my full manuscript, and one was the agency that represents Gillian Flynn, like the author of Gone Girl and Dark Places and all of that. So that's my brag. Like, that's my, you know, when people are like, I don't know, when people ask, that's my fun fact, you know? So I like to,
that's
like,
very cool.
They didn't, you know, they passed, obviously, not long after they got it. And at that point, I ended up going through another round of edits after that anyways. So they didn't even get the best version of it, because at that time, I just didn't realize, because it was my first time doing it, I just didn't know the like right timeline of anything. It kind of was a crapshoot. But that's my like not so humble brag.
That is cool.
My fun fact. So I have to toot my own horn a little bit, because I am proud of that. That like at least the first 3 pages that they read, they saw something in. So it's pretty cool.
I think my problem with it is whenever I talk to authors that are like, well, it means much more to be published versus self-published, you know, and they're sticking their nose up in the air. It's like, yeah, what are you making? 25 cents a book? And they're selling it for $6.99. And you still have to pay for some of your advertising, and you get in advance, and it's, you know, this big racket. There's some very small publishers that do a nice job. No doubt about it. But on the other hand, it's like, you know, when you listen to them, it's like, okay, give me some details. And then they kind of, you know, scrunch down their seat. You know, well, you know, it's all about the art. It's not about the profit. Okay, well, that's cool. That's cool. You know, good luck.
For me, I think like this first one, it was such a personal process for me that also once I actually started sending out the manuscripts, and the thought of like a publishing house having any semblance of creative control, that really like turned me off. So like that was another deciding factor. But at the end of the day, like, and my parents would kill me for saying this, but like my ultimate goal is just getting it in front of people. Like, I don't care if I make money doing this, it's that I like doing it. And I don't know if maybe it's naive in thinking that like working with a traditional publishing house would get me more exposure or what, but at the end of the day, like, I'm just going to exhaust all avenues to try and get my book in front of more people.
And that's good. I know a lot of traditionally published authors that are very happy with their publishers also.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a personal choice, and it's however you want to do it. You know, so it's not a big deal. I have a real, I have a little different drive as far as, you know, when I first threw one out, it was just to throw one out. And now that I am a little bit further along, it's like, I don't want to give them a cut of anything. Screw them.
Yeah.
You know, I'll do the work. That's fine. I'll hire people to do the work. That's fine. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's my choice, not theirs, on what goes in. The other thing is I kind of wander between a couple of different genres. And that makes it hard for a publisher to pick anything up. And that
Ah,
was, that's a very common critique, because they have a specific marketing formula, a
sure.
specific marketing plan that they use to be able to stick you in a publishing slot that year,
Mhm.
because they only take so many of those books on.
So
So,
what's that like for you hopping between genres? It's interesting you say that because my idea for my standalone is a totally different genre from sci-fi. Do you find that your readership follows you across genres? And like how is that for you? I'm curious.
so my book flirts with several different, my series flirts with different
Mhm.
genres. Um, in itself. So it's dark fantasy, so it kind of flirts with horror, also
Okay.
kind of flirts with grim dark, and
Mhm.
and it's urban fantasy. you know. And then I'll write short stories that are just pure horror,
Okay.
you know, and I publish them all underneath my name, not a pen name or anything. And I find that I don't have a problem with it. And so my next books, I got 4, 5, and 6 in a series that I'm throwing out.
Mhm.
Um, and then I've got nine books of it's like a series, a serial type thing, where I'm
Okay.
gonna put novelettes out every 2 weeks when I start publishing. So it's gonna be
Oh,
this,
wow.
each one's gonna have a little cliffhanger on it, and
Mhm.
it's kind of a steampunk. I'm gonna
Okay.
publish that underneath my name too. It's a dark steampunk type thing. I don't. I think the only time is if I ever decide to write a nonfiction, I probably use a pen name. But
Okay.
if it's anything to do within the fiction realm, or whether it's science fiction or horror or anything like that, I think I'm just going to stick with mine.
Kind of all is like somewhat adjacent. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I kind of feel like what my intention is for the next thing I want to do for a standalone is very like one dark, which my sentience is. Um and I think will be a little bit more like thrillery crime mystery vibes. And
Thrillery.
there is thriller-ish. Because there is like thrillery elements in Sentience too. So I feel like like Sentience isn't hard sci-fi. I tried to put enough in there to where I actually sounded like I did the research because I did, and I didn't want to just like for people who do enjoy sci-fi, I didn't want it to like gloss over that important stuff and seem like I didn't actually invest the time to really like dive into the kind of technology I was talking about, but at the same time, it's really accessible for people who don't get into that kind of stuff. And I think what I would say, like one of the reviews I got was that it was genre bending. And that's like, even though the genres that I want to bend together in this next project, I like that as my genre. Like my
Yeah.
genre is genre bending. So like
Is-
that's kind of how I'm envisioning it connecting.
Yeah, and the thing of it is that when you go to the publisher, they're going to be like, "Oh,
Hmm.
good story, but um, a friend of mine has sent a book out to publishers,
Hmm.
and it got discounted because it's kind of a young adult type thing, but there's one chapter where there wasn't a young adult presence.
Hmm.
So like, no, you have to add a teeny bopper to this chapter, otherwise it can't go. And she's like, that doesn't make any sense. And so she just turned around and self-published it, and it's a bestseller. But I mean, it's stuff like that drives me nuts. Just stupid things. It's like, well, we can't do that. Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, I guess, and I don't know, I say this now about wanting to try it. There's something about like, I don't know, maybe the cloud of it that makes me like want to do it. But you're right, there is that. And as an artist who creates in other like spheres, I do wonder how I would cope with that lack of creative
Yeah, and
control.
I'm not trying to convince you
Mhm.
either way. I just,
No, it's interesting to hear. I don't, like I said before, I'm not from the writing universe, so I don't really get a chance to kind of like talk about it with anybody. So it's interesting to hear different perspectives because I don't really have a ton of writer friends. Just because I don't come from like I studied fashion merchandising in college. I've loved writing throughout all of my life and always kind of before I realized what I was doing, like told stories in my head to fill the gaps of time or when I was
Mhm.
bored. But it wasn't until I was older that I connected the dots between enjoying writing, storytelling in my head, and dance having storytelling within it. So like I said, like all of my creative friends create in different, I have friends that are drag queens and burlesque performers and dancers, but not a lot of writer friends. So I don't get to do this much.
We'll have to fix that.
Sure.
So your book dabbles with artificial intelligence. Cool. So what do you think of artificial intelligence in the real world?
I think, jeez, do you want me to answer that question? I had to put my glasses on.
No, I ask questions and I expect you not to answer them because that's really a good conversation. Just sit there and just stare at me. That'd be
all
great.
Right. So for me, perfect. I think the biggest thing for me was like, I didn't realize, I found it really interesting, obviously. One of the first things that put me onto it was the movie Ex Machina. And that movie has a Turing test in it. And I remember watching that movie and being like, oh shit, this is crazy. Mm-hmm. And like to kind of give you the long version of the story, my book started as a dance piece before it was a book. And the dance piece was about artificial intelligence. So when I watched that movie, I was like, I have to explore this. And the biggest thing for me was not realizing how much artificial intelligence is already integrated into our lives now and how much it already influences us. The algorithms that run social media, the algorithms that anybody interacts with at work. My day job is retail buying. Every system that sends merchandise to stores or forecasts anything is an algorithm. I mean, the way that financial managers and bankers predict where to invest is algorithms. It's everywhere. And I didn't realize that. And I kind of was like, whoa, what if something more powerful came along? And being that society is so unaware of already like what we're interacting with, like we're so positioned to be overtaken by something smarter. And on top of it, humanity already has like a precedent set for how we interact with like voice bearing artificial intelligence. Like think about Siri, think about Alexa. Mm-hmm. The dynamic between us kind of just barking orders at them, and all of that was really interesting to me. And then I did more research and learned about, machine learning and singularity. And I was like, this shit is out of control. Like we are so primed for a robo apocalypse if somebody comes up with the right technology that I just had to write a book about it. So I think
in your research, did you run across that experiment they did over in Japan? I can't remember what company it was. It might have been Toyota. It might not have been.
No, tell me about it, please.
Oh, well, they created an AI, and it was running everything within this office. Mm-hmm. And it would start doing things, it was running all the cleaning machines. It was, taking care of all the maintenance. It was running around doing tasks, and it was learning as it was going. And so it had all these little robots that were running around like a little, Zumba, Roomba, whatever, and, this, that, and the other thing. And it was really kind of a cool project. The problem came when it started enforcing its rules. So if the lights had to be out at 5 o'clock, but somebody's working past 5 o'clock, they'd just be sitting there in the dark and they couldn't turn the damn lights on because the AI wouldn't let them. So they'd have to fix that. So I mean, it was just an experiment, so it wasn't that big of a deal. And so I kept on adding all these rules, and it was learning, how to interact with humans and everything else. And so they started going through the logs just to see, how it was interacting and what it was actually thinking. And they weren't able to understand them. Well, this damn AI decided that the language it was speaking in was not as efficient as it could be. So it made its own language to talk to the rest of the robots and reprogrammed everything. And then they start having control issues where, it'd be like, no, I want you to do this. And no, that's not the right way to do this. I'm sorry. And when the AI started answering that and then controlling the robots in a different language, they shut the whole damn thing down. And it's like, that was scary.
Yeah. And I think like in this story, I mean, obviously for character relationships and dynamics to happen, I made them all like humanoid AI. But the thought of like, you have to relinquish some sort of semblance of control to the AI so that the technology can work more efficiently.
Yeah.
And otherwise you have to like it to some degree, you kind of have to let it be influenced by the information that it's drinking in. And that's kind of like where the machine learning comes in. Like it kind of what it takes in makes it smarter for the future. And you have to give it that ability, or else it's kind of making it a little bit like, slower or less efficient than it could be. But in the process of doing that, you release a semblance of control. And I think if I get to a point where I write a sequel, which I plan to, I really want to explore like what happens when the AI go too far and take their command too literally. Because if there's no understanding of like the hierarchy of humanity and the natural order of things, then it's so easy for things to get out of control. But then when you add in that understanding of humanity and that understanding of the natural order of things, in my book at least, I kind of suggest that gives it personality and autonomy, and not necessarily is consciousness, but makes it maybe something where like it is sentient, or that kind of thing. So that's what I play a lot with, where like there's this whole power balance of like, depending on whatever your end goal for this technology is, and I can talk a little bit about that, but you kind of have to like either give it these elements of human personality and elements of human consciousness, or relinquish a little bit of control. And that can be scary if things go too crazy. And in my book, the AI have all different, they're being developed for different reasons. So there's 4 models of AI. One's called a helos, which is like a healer, like some sort of medical application. Aptly, because people are sick, and if there's humanoid robots, people are going to want to have sex with them. It's not wrong. It's not.
So you got a robot that screws and a doctor robot to
a doctor robot, a robot that screws. One's called a coercos, which was my take on a military application, because at the end of the day, it wouldn't make sense to kind of just make robot soldiers, because that's a lot more expensive than sending regular people to battle. So the coercos model kind of does some behind the scenes manipulating and things like that. And then the last one is a surveillos. So think, somebody who does like undercover work, rather than sending in an agent to be undercover, you would send in this robot model. So those are the purposes. And each one, kind of has to have a personality and a backstory, and think that they feel things and that they know things, so that they can perform their end role. And obviously in the context of this experiment, they're not performing their end role, but their end role influences their personality and their identity. So that kind of shapes who their character is within the confines of the experiment, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Now back to the sexy robots. No, just kidding. Yep. Nope. Not gonna go there. I did you see on Facebook where that guy married his sex doll?
No, I didn't. But the idea for it came from, there's this show that was like, I'm gonna forget it, but there was this show that like talked about all different ways that relationships happen in the modern world. So like all different kinds of like, I don't know, from like kink to whatever. But this person had this robot that could be controlled from a distance, and obviously you can imagine what happens next. But basically that's where I got the idea from. Because I was like, wow, like if this technology happens, like some weirdo is absolutely going to take advantage of this. And then next, shortly after that, Westworld came out, and you can watch in Westworld, what people do when they go to Westworld. And it's just seems like second nature for people to
Yeah.
go there with robots.
Yeah, you know, I can just imagine, you know, the red light district in Amsterdam all of a sudden has these sex robots.
Robots. I know that's
Yeah,
actually
somebody pushes the wrong button because they're a little excited and it just rips the
that
guy's
could be a cool
penis
short
off.
story. That
Yeah.
could be a cool short story.
That would be, yeah, some guy running around bleeding to death. Cool short story. Yeah, it would be kind of cool. It would be kind of cool, and then you'd have to have them rise up against the humans or something like that because they're sick of, you know, minimum wage or whatever the heck they, you know.
But yeah, I mean, if you think about the way so suddenly you have these humanoid robots that are getting talked to like they're Alexa or Siri and have immense power and capability, it's not hard to imagine how they're an uprising kind of snowballs from there, which is what I hint at in the book and is ultimately what I think I want to explore in future evolutions of the story.
I'm pretty sure that Alexa hates me.
I don't have one because I've thoroughly freaked myself out by algorithms and robots and all of the above. So I like to avoid them where possible.
I get a kick out of how you'll just be in the middle of a conversation and not say anything. It sounds like Alexa, and all of a sudden, how can I help you? And it's like, oh, that's freaky.
Yep.
You know, it's like, I'm listening, you know.
They know too much. I mean, even social media, just the way that like, I haven't watched it yet. And I've had probably like, you know, not 30, that's an extreme number, but probably more like 5 people text me and tell me that I should watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix, which is all about how like social media's algorithms influence people and impact lives and will soon impact, you know, upcoming generations. And it's just interesting to think about and to see how much power, you know, they already have over us and how easily it is, you know, how easily influenced I even find myself sometimes by social media. It's such a dark hole sometimes.
So how does social media affect you? I mean, you're saying, oh, I find myself being influenced by social media every now and then. I mean,
for me, this is like probably a shitty answer, but like at the end of the day, I said this already, but I'm a Capricorn. So I am so influenced by like seeing other people's successes that it makes me like I have to do a new project, or I have to take on this new thing, or I have to do this, or things like that. So I don't necessarily feel like influenced in the sense of like product purchasing or things like that, but it definitely influences my fixation on output and productivity, which is, I think, sometimes an unhealthy relationship in my life. Like I'm so obsessed with it that I have to, like right now I'm kind of unplugged from social media because I want to start guiding in this new, you know, creative project of this next novel I want to write. And when I see too much, I'm so pulled in all of the different directions of all of the different possibilities that I end up getting myself in such a overstimulated like hole to where I feel like I can't create. And then in turn, I lay on my couch and scroll through Instagram more. So it kind of works in the way that they want it to, like, you know. But that's
I have found myself getting lost into social media every now and then because I love smart assy type things. You know, or whatever. And they'll say, oh, cool, look at this. Oh, cool, look at this. I make a point not to read anything, or I make a point to not believe any news that I see on social media.
Yeah.
You know, because that's, I mean, it's 90% bullshit, you know, but I think it is. I don't know, maybe not.
I mean, I think it's if anything in the last year, you can see how quickly things can go viral regardless of like there is this element of like, you know, no fact checking. And I don't know if it's rolled out to everybody, but Instagram started to do this thing where like there's this little banner that pops up that's like that says like this information may not be factual. It hasn't been fact checked, which, you know, things just are so can't think of the word that I want, but like so prolific and just so like, exponential how quick stuff gets around. So it's very easy, if it's something that's sensational, for things to get around more quickly, regardless of if it's accurate or not. Which is I think a huge phenomenon of the internet. So I do like to always try and listen to an episode of The Daily from the New York Times, or like flip through NPR or something, so I can make sure I'm at least somewhat informed.
And here's the thing I think about fact checkers. How do I know they're not full of shit?
And then everything also, at the end of the day, like, it's really hard for humanity not to be biased in any one way or another.
Oh yeah.
So there's, a lot of information, and you're right. How do you know? So
I mean, if you're gonna listen to the conspiracy theories, what they're doing is propaganda, and they're just cutting things out.
I kind of love conspiracy theories, though.
What's that?
I said I kind of love conspiracy theories.
I do too. I that's one of the things I go online for.
Yeah.
Just to read what's the next crazy ass thing.
Conspiracy theories, and I will always spend way more time on the internet than I need to researching cults. I'm fascinated with cults and like the psychology behind how people get indoctrinated and how the leaders like get the influence that they have. I want to write something about cults. I don't know when I will or how, but one day I will, because I'm so very fascinated by them.
I agree. Cults are very interesting to look up. The witchcraft and pagan type stuff, and anything that has got kind of an occult feeling to it is very interesting. You can get almost anything you want on the internet, whether it's true or not, who knows. But when you're doing research, it's really interesting to see some of the things you can come up with.
Yeah, for sure.
Your Google search.
But yeah, definitely some of my frequent searches. I always end up at a cult or somehow digging into.
So is there a sex robot cult out there that you're currently eyeballing?
But maybe I need to write about one, and I like make it up.
Just create one.
Well, it's funny you say that, because well, no, there's no sex robot cult, but one of the ideas, now this is like not, I don't think a spoiler, but just an idea for like the future. Like, I did have this idea that I would play around with in a future version, or maybe in my head, Sentience is like a 3-part thing where there's, 3 books. But I had this idea of like a cult that like worships technology and that is subservient to the AI. So yeah, to bring it full circle, I have actually explored that before, and I've started. It's funny, and maybe you can advise me as somebody who's written like multiple a series, more or less. Let me just say it for what it is, a series. I find it really hard. I've been finding it really hard to have the discipline to pick up my. So I'm 30,000 words into my sequel. And it's very hard for me because I have it outlined. And when I wrote Sentience, it was such a free flowing, I kind of figured out the story as I went. And that was so fun for me. And writing a story where I know what happens already is not as fun. So what advice do you have for somebody tackling the second book and what they hope to be a series?
Well, you see, this is where I have to get my, my Star Wars voice. I was like, I feel the conflict within you. Some people are very, very good at outlining, and they call them plotters.
Yeah, I don't like, I can do it, but then I feel like it takes the motivation of me actually like writing it out, because I know what happens. Like, I felt like I was so urgent to write Sentience because I didn't know what was going to happen. I had to write it to figure it out. But now with the sequel, I kind of know. So I don't know if I'm a plotter.
The pantsers are the people that kind of write down an idea and then just go with it. And it just kind of ends up whatever it ends up. It's something that comes from, you can say, a section of your brain or your soul or your heart or, whatever. And it just kind of poops itself out on the paper. Now, the problem with that is that you find yourself writing a true story I mean, something that's, this is the story I want, and you'll write yourself into corners, and you have to figure out how the hell to get yourself out of that. And that's where the plotter part kind of comes in. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, this would be the next logical step. And then once the plotter takes over and kind of fixes your mess, then you can go back to pantsing.
So a hybrid.
I talked to a guy, his name's Frank Butterfield. I think that's what his name was, but it doesn't matter. He's written 73 books, and he's a complete pantser. He just reads a newspaper article from whatever time he wants to write in, and then just goes with the story and just kind of, oh, this is what it looks like, and just pants the whole thing. He doesn't I don't outline anything. It's like, oh my God, and he's successful.
Yeah, I think that's why. So obviously, like I said, I started the sequel, and I have this idea for a standalone, and I feel very pulled to the standalone because I can do that, just pantser kind of like, just go with it thing again. But I specifically, and I keep looking over here because I have a copy of the book sitting here, and I specifically wrote book 1 on the side. So like when I mean, obviously the people listening can't see this, but you can. I put it on the spine so that I have to write another one because I want to. And I keep looking at it, and book 1 stares me in the face every day so that I'm reminded that I want to write book 2. But God, it's hard. It's hard because there's rules now. The characters are very not rigid, but they have their identity. They act a certain way. Whereas when I wrote it the first time, I was making the characters, they could act how I wanted them to. But now when a situation presents itself, there's option A or option B, and you know where a character is going to go. So that kind of predictability, like every time I put together a situation, like I know what's going to happen because I know my character, I know their allegiances, and this, that, and the other. And it takes the fun out of it for me a little bit. So my thought is, if I write this other standalone, by the time that's done, if I come back to it, these characters will be old friends that I am grateful to be reacquainted with. So that's where I'm at right now, but who knows?
One thing that's helped me is writing short stories. So write a short story in your world, and maybe just take one character and do something silly with them, for 5,000-10,000 words.
Well, I'm very much like a person who has to write things down. So don't judge me for the fact that I'm done. But that's a really good idea. I actually played around with short stories after finishing the book, like while I was building my website and marketing my stuff. And one of the short stories I wrote was about a war journalist, because I was reading a lot of the work from the journalist Marie Colvin. And now I think that short story is actually going to be like a jumping off point for this standalone that I want to write. So you're right. It's helpful.
Very cool. The other thing that I had to do for a book was I had to write the villain story.
Oh, my villain's an asshole. That won't be fun.
Well, so everybody, you write I wrote a short story just from their perspective, because I needed to understand in a better way what his end goal was and how he would react to every time when my hero screwed something up for him. And that was, somebody gave me that tip at one point in time. If you get stuck, right from a different POV, just write a short story on it, and just write either an outline or something like this. And it actually really helped. It broke a problem fixed a problem that I was having.
Interesting.
Because I knew what I wanted the hero to do, but just didn't make any, I couldn't get the villain to kind of react the way I wanted to. So why don't you write it from the villain's perspective and see what he does?
I like that. I also am thinking back to, and this is like, so when I was in high school, one of the like YA books that I read was the Divergent series. And I remember reading them, and like, I didn't even read the third one because I heard what happened and was so angry. But I read the first 2 and I devoured them, I think in like 48 hours straight. Like, I remember going to school in my uniform because I had stayed up all night in my uniform and was reading until the last second. And the author did that. She wrote either a very, very, very short novel or like a collection of short stories from another character's point of view. And I loved it. So This is a great suggestion. I'm going to try it.
And then you take that stuff and you create lead magnets out of it so that, somebody signs up for your newsletter, they can get these free short stories that can't get anywhere else. And then after a while, when you get bored with it, or you can release an anthology underneath the same series saying, okay, these are origin stories, or these are, side stories or whatever. I mean, it's just, you can build that library up and use it for whatever you want. It's all your material, but it's just, these are things that people have told me to do over the years. And it's like, cool, and it really does work out well.
That's actually really good advice. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Every now and then I repeat what somebody else told me.
Have a few gems.
Yeah. Every now and then squirrels, blind squirrels find nuts and stuff like that.
No, but it's helpful. I mean, it's like I said earlier, just not having there's some things that I feel like, you read blogs, you listen to podcasts, but there is merit to actually talking to people who've lived through it and who've done it, which is nice. And not being able to do that, I think sometimes I get very siloed and very caught up in what my process is, and trying to the navigation of going from having done it once to trying to be somebody who does this all of the time is interesting. So I feel myself kind of trying to get back and replicate the circumstances under which I wrote Sentience. But it's hard, and it's trying to figure out what it's going to be like in the writing process of this next one. It's just different. I can't quite figure out I know at some point I have to just jump into it, but I don't know what the best way, or all of that. So it's definitely a little bit of a limbo state for me right now. And I really know that I want to do it, and I know that I'm ready, but I have this I don't know, do I have how do I start it? I kind of blocked out the process of writing the first one in a way that I have to remember how I did it to get this, either the sequel or the standalone going, so that there's something, because I would like to, this process took 3 years. I would like to have another one out in 3 years. So, or less, ideally less, but
yeah,
I'm particularly slow, I think, with my creativity. I'm not the kind of person who gets a lot out. I envy my dance friends who live the gig life and perform every weekend and have a new number and can create that rapidly, because there's merit to that too.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of how often I try to do that, it's just not my style.
Sure. And I think that's the most excuse me, I think that's the most important thing, is remembering what your style is, and try not, you can modify it, but again, so my guess is that you'll find that your second book goes a little bit faster than your first book.
Okay. Sure hope so.
And as that first book's hard. That first book is a bitch, to write. And then the second one, I think, is a little bit easier. And then the third one, and as you start adding to your writing inventory, I think it gets easier and easier. There's a lot of people that, start out at 200-300 words a day that I've talked to that, write, get up to 3, 5, 10, 18, 20,000 words a day.
That's
insane to me. I'm so,
Yeah.
somebody just asked me this question recently, and I have 2 to 3 hours in front of a screen writing maximum. That's it. Like, I don't have longer than that in me, or I am then searching cults on the internet. And a lot of my writing is like, I remember back to this, you know, when I had downtime, like I would quickly just text myself the dialogue that I wanted to happen, like super informal. And then when I had time to sit down, I had this roadmap of conversations and things like that. So I'm trying to do those kinds of things, like go back to texting myself the thoughts and the dialogue and the thought, like the moments that how I used to. And I remember last time, like I made a lot of playlists because I'm really inspired by music, and imagery really helps me too. So I've been trying to do a lot more of that again. That kind of was like I went off on a tangent there, but
No, that's
I forget
cool.
what the original
where the thread of that conversation was. But that's also what I'm doing right now.
Boy, I don't remember either. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's so you've got your process and you got, kind of the habits that you formed with the first one. They'll change with the second one, the third one, the fourth one, I mean, things change and it depends on what kind of, where you're at in life or whatever. And, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll pick up tidbits from other people, other authors, or you'll read something like, I could do that, and things just naturally, it's something that you build on. It really is. I don't think writing your first book will ever be the same as writing your second book. Neither will it be writing your third book. It'll be, something a little bit different process, and I say that from a pantser standpoint. I don't say that from a plotter standpoint because they replicate what they're doing, time after time after time. If you get that, that outline and you build the layers and, your story's all written out and everything. And okay, it's all done for you. Now you just have to fill in dialogue. Okay. And that's a very efficient way of doing it. But if you're a pantser, you can't do that because you can't pay attention to, you can probably I get 4 or 5 chapters in and then it's like, I just go off on a tangent and it's like, I'm killing people that are in, future chapters and doing this and doing that. And I just totally hose myself. So then I just ignore the outline after a bit and away I go. I just know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
Type thing. But, it's all whatever process you develop and whatever works for you. That's it. It's your art. It's your creation. It's your, baby book.
For sure. It's funny you say that. When I was like marketing Sentience, I like took a whole picture where I like swaddled my book and like held it like a baby, and it was a big hit. So it's true. It's like, it is like in a way, I mean, for me, I wrote this at like a very, I think like formative time in my life. And I went through some like mental health struggles while I was doing it. And it's very personal for me because of that. And it's my book baby. It is.
It has a birthday and everything.
Yep, it does. October 30th.
Yep, your book birthday. Aw. Okay. You'll start making your passwords around it and all that kind of stuff. And it's like,
I haven't gotten there yet. I'm still dog name passwords.
Dog name passwords. Okay.
Yeah, I'm up to, well, we actually just got a third dog. So I have plenty of material to work with now because we just got a new one.
Oh, cool beans. Cool beans. So what else is on your mind? Huh. Didn't think I'd ask that question, huh?
No, I didn't.
Holy cow.
All right. So I think another thing too that really makes, not necessarily like on my mind today, but I think one thing that's very much like present in my head when I talk about my book is the fact that it started as a dance piece. So for me as an author, storytelling was very much learned through dance. So I danced all my life. And when I got to college, I started to dance for this company called the Blind Faith Project. And all of their pieces were very, very story-based, 20-minute, 30-minute, or either like full hour pieces where it was all telling one story. They did things about the women's suffrage movement, breast cancer, zombies, demons, this whole piece about like kind of like the cycle of life told using chairs. And I learned storytelling through that and how movement and like motif can evoke and create a world. So yes, I always enjoyed writing, and in college I took like creative writing classes as electives whenever I could, but composition, plot, character, all of that I think really came from dance. And after the fact, so I created this contemporary dance piece for the Philly Fringe Festival in 2017. That was really where I started to build the world of my novel. And basically, once I finished the piece, I had already been kind of like telling stories in my head and had this like library of characters. And I knew that this project was a big undertaking. It ended. I had this world, I had these characters, and I had a lot of free time. And that's kind of how I started writing the book. But looking back, what's really interesting for me is, and this is something to the point of the question of being top of mind, I think my writing in this book was really, really movement heavy. All of my dialogue, all of the action is very like, you always know what the characters are doing, and they're always emoting through their bodies, which I think is very unique. And in my head, I was like, I've heard a lot of people say it kind of reads in a way like television, but for me, I think it reads a little bit more like dance, because I learned to emote through movement. So now my characters do that. So I think, to kind of tie it back to taking on a new project, I feel very much like this book was dialogue heavy, very movement heavy. And one thing that has been kind of top of mind for me is like, I want to explore and create characters that are a little bit more introspective and less in their bodies, you know, more in their head, less in their body. Because there's not a lot of digression. There's not a lot of internal dialogue. There's not a lot of, I don't know what else, I guess we'll call a spade, but that's really what it is. Like, there's not a lot of that in Sentient. So I think it would be interesting to try to write a story. And then I wonder in the future, when I do pick up the sequel, how it will be writing and having it be consistent with Sentience, because I've obviously, with the pandemic, not being able to perform, I've been and not being able to choreograph, have been pretty removed from dance. So it's not as fresh in my body as it was when I literally just choreographed a piece in the world around this story. So that's a big thing for me. I think I always like to bring that to the table when I talk about my book, because I feel like sometimes, I don't know, I feel like I don't really have like necessarily like traditional writing credentials, but to me, and I always kind of wondered like, why writing a book? Like, how did I get there? And then when I found the thread of storytelling and how storytelling is present in dance, and then I also, like, my day job, I'm a buyer. I work in retail buying, and storytelling is in the assortments that I build for the customers that go to our stores, and storytelling's in writing. And when I kind of like found this common thread of like how all of the things I do tie together, it was a very aha moment for me. So I feel like, to kind of understand my writing style, what the book's about, my creative process, and all of the things, it's important to kind of know the dancer piece of the puzzle.
Sure.
So that's one thing that's on my mind.
Absolutely. You know, and I understand that from a couple of different perspectives, but you know, I was telling you earlier, I've got you know, daughters that have been in dance forever, and you know, that went, you know, 18 years through it or whatever. And yeah, I see that. I can see that, you know, what you're describing in your aha moment and everything else, how that kind of flows from one thing to another. I mean, it's all very creative and, you know, interpretive, I guess, would be
it leads into all of the different areas of my life, creatively, composition, you know, also discipline. It's I think people who don't know dance, or like don't get it or interact with it, don't realize the discipline that goes into it, which I'm sure you know, and you probably experience kind of like secondhand with all of the cost of like leotards and tights, and how hair has to be, and what time you have to be, and where you have to be, and all of the above.
I'm not kidding you. I think I wrote one of my books at dance competitions.
Probably.
You know, I mean, they're just, you know, I honestly think dance competitions are god awful from my perspective.
It's funny. I actually went to a studio that didn't compete. So while I was a kid, I always was very envious of competitive dancers. But now as an adult, I went to a studio that was very focused on contemporary modern dance. And it was very, I don't know what the word is, but it was more focused on, I don't even know what the word is. I feel like we were just a lot more improv, a lot more experiment, a lot more free form, which I loved as a kid, but I also, like, anytime I encountered another dancer who competed, felt like I was not, you know, up to snuff or whatever. So yeah, now looking back on it, I'm kind of like happy that I didn't compete, but when I was a kid, I was very envious of competitive dancing.
Yeah. My experience is that usually the first dance is in the morning, 2 hours away at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay. You know, so you either drive it or you stay overnight, whatever. And then the next dance is around noon, and the next one's at 3.
Whew.
And the next one's at 5. And then the fourth one or fifth one, you know, is, you know, towards the end of the day. And then you have the massive award ceremony that lasts way too long.
And what's that, at like 10 o'clock at night?
Yeah, pretty much.
You know, God, I'm glad. I guess I'm glad I missed out on that.
You know, it's really, it's a wonderful thing to watch your kids dance. It's just, I wish it was, you know, maybe within an hour, you know, watch them do 5 dances versus, and I get they work, you know, everything else. So you have to.
It's interesting too with like competing, because they compete so regularly, and maybe like, it's now that I'm thinking it through, like the studio that I was at, we performed at our recitals. We had one spring concert, but like you worked all year to perform a piece basically twice. Yeah. So I think that's kind of where I got that, like, you work on something for so long before it's like out in the world. Whereas a kid who competes, you know, they're used to, okay, you probably, what do you do? Competitions every couple months. So like you're pumping stuff more than that. Yeah. So you're pumping stuff out so much more frequently.
So it was at least once a month.
Ooh, oh my God.
And it started in January. You know, that was
Jesus.
competition season. So, you know, you had the first little competition, you just kept on going up and up and up until you got to the nationals. And the national.
I mean, at that point, if you're competing monthly, then like they are learning routines probably every couple weeks, which is like the kind of like the opposite of how I learned to do it. And then probably still doing a recital on top of all of those things. So it's a lot more like, it's interesting. I never had that thought before that could have influenced how I create. But thinking of it that way, it definitely does, because that was what I learned. You work on something so long and you have one chance to get it out there and one chance for it to be perfect.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. The only other thing I'd tell you is, have you ever tried dictation?
No, I actually recently had this idea because I, now working from home, spend a ton of time in front of my computer, where in buying normally in a regular non-COVID world, I would be in New York or traveling or in our stores at least a couple days a week. So back in regular times, I only had 3 days a week that were sit in front of the computer office days. Mm-hmm. Now it's all of the time. And the expectations for how much and how long we're in front of the computers have gotten longer. So it's a lot of screen time. So I recently had the idea that I should handwrite things, but then I think quicker than I write, and that gets frustrating. So I did recently think about dictation, just because I can kind of, you know, do it without having to look at a screen.
Yeah. I started doing it with Google Docs.
And it works. Like you're confident in and like comfortable with how it actually receives what you say.
So I was talking to a lady, H.M. Gooden, and she dictates her books.
Oh, wow.
What she does is and we talked about it in a podcast. She's the one that actually kind of put me onto it. So she'll, on her way to work, dictate.
Okay.
And then on her way back, she'll dictate. And then that night she'll go through and she'll edit it real quick. Just to make sure, because some words get screwed up and, you know, some things are not complete thoughts or whatever. But she said, you know, as I'm walking or driving or whatever, it's just da 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 da. And it's almost like, you know, this other part of the brain just kind of takes over and starts talking into the microphone while the other part's driving. And she said it's really interesting, the kind of stuff that she comes up with. You know, and the conversations and everything else. And it's not necessarily a complete draft, but she can, you know, thousands of words done in a day, and then just go back and breeze through it. And okay, that's it. You know, lock it up, and then go back, once she does her second draft and say, okay, and that's where
That.
yeah, just get a lapel mic or just, your Bluetooth or whatever, and just talk into it.
Yeah.
And it's actually, you got that cell phone there, and it's all based in the cloud. So ta-da. But it seems to work really good. I haven't spent the money on Dragon Natural or Speaking Naturally or anything like that.
Yeah, I've heard of Dragon. I've briefly researched it just out of curiosity, but if Google Docs does it, I mean, it's worth a shot at least. I'm just really trying to find anything and to get back into that flow, man. Like I just need to get back into that flow.
I think Microsoft's is not as good as Google Docs, but I think Google, they have an AI that kind of interprets for you. I know.
Yeah, full circle once again.
Full circle once again, and I think it does a better job than Microsoft does. I really do. And I've never ever I'm an IT guy by trade. Sure. And I've set Dragon Naturally up for lawyers and insurance agents and people that they want that dictation. And I've never seen that program work really good. I've heard of all sorts of people that claim it does. And I've read posts in Facebook and stuff like that where it's like, oh my God, it saved my life. And it's like, I've never seen that program work.
Yeah.
Hours and hours of training and everything else. And I think everybody at one point in time spends $350 on it and then throws it away after 6 months or sooner because it's easier to write or do anything else. But I've worked with a few of them. And I think Google probably does the best job, especially if you don't have, especially if you don't want to invest in anything. It's just there.
Yeah, that's true. All right. I'm getting lots of free advice tonight.
It's opinions and maybe advice.
It's funny. I feel like every time I do like a podcast or anything, I always am like, sorry, let me write that down, because the second that I don't, it's like, like just right out the mental window. I always have to write good ideas down.
I'm just honored that you're writing something I say down. I mean, it's a podcast. You'll never be able to see it again.
It's true.
Just kidding. Well, we're kind of running over an hour, I guess. Holy cow.
Time flies, right?
Time flies. Anything you want to tell your readers about or anything in closing?
No, just would like to tell people to check it out on Amazon. I think I mentioned this, but the ebook is 99 cents. The paperback $7.99. At the end of December, I'm actually going to be doing a free download through the Amazon, whatever it is, of the ebook. And then follow me on social media. Instagram's the best place at Courtney Patricia Hunter. And then anything else you can just find on my website at CourtneyPHunter.com.
Yep. And just so you know, when I publish this, there'll be show notes.
Awesome.
And all of your social media that you have on your website and anything else that you happen to give me, plus your website, plus links to your book, will be on the show notes.
There we go. Show notes. We love a show note.
We love show notes. Show notes are our masters.
No, this was awesome. Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun and really enjoyed talking to another writer. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, you know what? That's what this show is for. Just, BSing a little bit.
Right.
See what we come up with. But I do have to close this out. So I am going to say thank you very much for listening to, this is Jeff Bacon again with the DIY Writer Podcast. And if you wouldn't mind, please follow me on any app you happen to listen to podcasts on, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and whatever else you want to do to support this program and all these starving artists that really need your help. Buy a damn book, will you? Just kidding. Anyway, I hope y'all have a good day, and I want you to keep your chin up. 2020 is almost over. Bye-bye.
Please hit the subscribe button. I get a bonus for every subscriber, and I only need 1,506 more to become a full-time paid employee. Help me, please.